So welcome to the Coaching Focus podcast. In this series, we'll be exploring how to create a coaching culture. I'll be conversing with HR professionals and senior leaders who have either implemented or have started to implement a coaching culture within their organisation. Today, I'm joined by Lian Hillier. Lian is the Chief People Officer at the Principles for Responsible Investment, PRI for short. And we're working with her and her executive team to build a coaching culture. The PRI is the world's leading proponent of responsible investment, and it encourages investors to use responsible investment to enhance returns and manage their risks better. Before working at PRI, Lian worked at Nesta, the UK's innovation agency for social good, where she was the Director of People and Culture. As an experienced HR professional, Lian also shares a love and passion for coaching for a better tomorrow. Welcome, Lian. It's a real pleasure to have you as our guest.
Thank you, Trayton, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. I'm looking forward to sharing my insights in coaching culture.
Brilliant. And I'm sure our listeners will get a lot from the conversation we're just about to have. One of the things I like to do when we have guests along is just really articulate and understand from themselves what they mean by a coaching culture. So if you wouldn't mind, just express in your own words what a coaching culture is for our listeners.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, a coaching culture is about a way of working. It's about finding ways in which we can get the best out of our people. So at the PRI, we are deploying quite a broad concept of that. So it's not just me as a leader that is responsible for that culture. We're trying to filter it through the organisation. Not there yet, working on it. But yeah, it's really a method of enabling people, getting the best out of people. And I think in this day and age, as a leader, I don't have the answers to everything, and I shouldn't have the answers to everything. And it should be a way in which I can empower the amazing people that we have at the PRI to help us to get the best.
Yeah. And when you say it like that, it sounds so simple, isn't it? We just ask leaders to coach to get the best out of their people, and which leader wouldn't want to do that? And then we create a coaching culture. So I guess the other question that's lingering for me is, why is it so hard when it sounds so simple?
Because I think the day-to-day gets in the way, right?
Yeah.
I think, when you're a manager or a leader, it's really easy to just switch into doing, right? Somebody comes along to you, you go, yeah, I've got a solution, and you do it, and you go into that kind of action mode. I think as well, we're, as managers, as leaders, we are schooled in the art of directing people, and that's a mode that we're used to. So to then kind of unlearn that behavior and then learn new ways of working, it's hard, right? I wish it was easy, but it's not. It is hard. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that you talk into which would be interesting, certainly for me to talk into, is you're absolutely right. When we speak to many leaders, they do tend to, although they like to think they don't, have a directive approach.
Yeah.
So there is an element of unlearning to relearn how to be less directive.
Yeah.
And how are you going about that within PRI to try and help people to unlearn in a busy schedule that, not just within PRI, but everybody has? How are you doing that?
Yeah. So I think it comes from the top, for starters. I think this would not work if you haven't got buy-in from the most senior leaders within the organisation. So that's where we've started. I think we have a CEO who has quite a natural coaching style anyway. So it's his tendency of operation. So it's quite normal for him. It's quite relatable. And so he instinctively bought into it as an approach and a mode. Actually, the more of the resistance was at the next level.
Okay.
And I think getting there. So I think they instinctively buy into the concept, but have some preconceived ideas that, coaching's like touchy-feely, or, you've got to, go into territory that is not necessarily their norm or their way of working. But I think once you convert them, and in all honesty, Trayton, it was you that did it for us at the PRI. You changed their way of thinking. And then once they've got on board, it's great to see how the rest of the organisation are getting behind it. But I think we're then seeing that at the levels below. There's hesitancy, there's skepticism. And really that can only be overcome by going, right, let's just get in, let's do it, let's experience it, let's see what it means. But also making sure they invest the time. I don't think you can rush this training, the start of it, the training. Yeah. You need to make sure that your leaders give up that time in, as you say, busy schedules. That's hard to do. And believe me, my team will tell you the amount of coercion and planning and, the time in advance that we got this kind of booked in, and the communication that goes into it. It's quite substantial. You can't just go tick done. But I think it's paying dividends.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a lot there. So if I may just unpick that for our listeners, because I think there's some really key lessons and learning in there as well. Even the short period that you and I have been working with each other. The first thing, and I know our listeners will be calling into this, is you need senior leadership buy-in. And you're very lucky with your chief exec to have someone, as you say, has got a coaching style, sees the value of it. I think it would be fair to say not all of your exec team did at that point, but after going through, they were converted and saw the value of coaching. And as you say, realizing that it's not soft and fluffy. Coaching is about focusing on performance and getting and achieving that performance in a different way than you might have done in the past. And the other bit that I'm hearing here, which strange a lot of other clients that I work with forget to do, is about communication is key. It takes time to prepare individuals to accept that and engage them and educate them about what coaching is. And sometimes, I suggest to organizations not to use the word coaching, because if there's been a coaching initiative before and it's not gone down well, it's sort of that attitude of, oh, not coaching again, or not another HR initiative. So again, not just the communication, but where the communication comes through. We've been very lucky with David and the rest of the exec team that they've bought into that, and will come in and communicate right at the beginning of all the other programs. So it seemed to be coming from the exec team rather than just HR. So there's some key lessons within that.
Yeah, critical.
May I come into, I guess, the point that you also raised, that people are really busy. And just knowing the work that's going on within PRI at the moment, not just outside, but inside as well. But with the global geopolitical changes that are going on, that makes you even busier. How do you get individuals within a busy schedule to buy into attending a training program, or even just thinking about what that new operating system and mindset is? How do you achieve that?
So I think for us, for our people, I'm sure, listeners this will resonate with them. They want to feel some ownership. They want to feel some connection with what you're creating. So I think for us, we've done it in quite a number of different ways. So some of it is, as you've just said in your last statements, getting the leadership to role model, getting the leadership to, so the executive team, our chief exec, to demonstrate to our directors what we're doing, why we're doing it, the importance of it, where it's coming from. So that's included things like linking it to employee engagement survey results, employee engagement feedback, exit interview information that we've been seeing. So there's a kind of, in our organisation, there's quite a deep analytical side. So you have to feed that analytics on the one side.
Yeah, nice.
I think there's also what's in it for me. Like,
Yeah,
human beings want to know that if you're going to give up this time, it's going to be worth it. Um, and so again, making sure in the communication that we're having to say there's going to be benefits in it for you, and linking our leadership. So when our executives have been coming along and positioning the training right at the very beginning, giving some kind of personal stories, some personal experience from them, I think has been helping our directors go, oh, okay, I can see where it's coming from. I'm not going to lie though, there's still been skepticism. I think you've
sure.
experienced that as they've been going in. But what has been good, and I think this is where listeners want to get their leaders to, is I'm willing to give it a go
Mm,
rather
mm,
than,
mm.
and this is why, you can talk about carrot and stick, but I would generally go towards the carrot rather than the stick. Because if you're beating people into this is mandatory, you have to go, they're less likely to walk into it with a smile on their face. I think because we've tried to give the encouragement, the information, the space for our managers to go, okay, I see where you're going with this. I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah,
That's a good opener. And then I
yeah,
have the pleasure of knowing that they're walking into training with you, Trayton, and know that they're going to get a good experience
yeah,
and make that space to air their skepticism, to air their concerns, and work through that in the right format and the right setting.
yeah. And I love that, just give it a go. You don't force them. And I do have that discussion with a number of HR directors. Should we make this mandatory or not? If anyone's forced to do something, you go in with a negative mindset straight
Yeah.
away. And I love the point about, what I call the Whiffam factor. What's in it for me? I'm going to give
Yeah.
up my precious time when I'm a busy schedule. What am I going to get out of it?
Yeah.
And I think if I could just talk into what I see people get out of it, it's not just
Mm.
enjoyment to know there's a different approach, but they realize that they don't have to do the thinking for the other person. They can just, instead of giving great answers where they're having to work hard to find the solution for the other person, that they can just ask great questions. And then the other person does the thinking, takes that away, and lo and behold, it creates time for them because that individual isn't keep coming back to say, how do I do this? What do I need to do? What do you want me to do? So I think that's the main what's in it for me factor.
Yeah.
And the other thing which I love that you don't know, this is work in progress, is around the employment engagement and using that as a main drive about what's in it for the organization, what's in it for others apart from the leader. Or people will be led more effectively. People will engage. And, as you and I know, that the value in high levels of engagement through Gallup surveys and other things is a very powerful business dividend to have. So there's huge value, not just for the leader, not just for those they lead, but also for the organization as well. And I guess in your world and the world that you've come from, for society, creating better conversations with not only within, but outside of the organization as well. So I'm curious to understand, what is it that you're actually, and I think this is an obvious answer, but it's useful for our listeners just to hear this. What was the reason for wanting to develop a coaching culture?
Mm.
Why now? And what is it that you hope to get out of that?
Yeah. So the idea came from within my team initially. So Martin, one of the directors in my team, had done a lot of work on coaching, was training for his own coaching certificate, had a lot of enthusiasm and energy around coaching. We started to do some work and started thinking about how we might embed it. In all honesty, the energy came from having a new CEO.
Yeah,
When David joined, opportunity for change raises its head.
yeah,
And he was excited by what we laid out as a concept. And I think, there were things that were working in the PRI, there were things that weren't working. And it was very clear that a lot of the things that could be helped and aided would happen within that kind of coaching culture, within that coaching environment, by getting our leaders to have different conversations, but also getting everybody to be enabled by this. That's the end goal. That's the end vision.
Yeah.
Trayton, we're not there yet. Your listeners won't be as fully aware, but we're only just beginning the training rollout within our different levels of management. But that's the eventual aim, is that everybody will feel empowered to create a coaching environment to enable each other in different ways. And I think once we got to the point of having knowing that we got some buy-in from the CEO, the runway was very, very different. I think we also had the brilliant situation that Martin, of course, had worked with you previously. So we knew that we had the tools at our disposal that we could quickly tap into and work with you to create a program that was going to, really impact the organisation. I think also what's quite important there is that it's not just a let's get our managers trained done. That's just a training program for us. Sure. The culture comes from really embedding it across the organisation. And it's not just about the training, it's also how do we bring it into leadership competencies? How do we bring it to life within our culture charter? How do we begin, thinking about it in all the different ways of working? That became where Martin and I together pushed that conversation and allowed it to get some kind of feet within the organisation. And once we could feel there was that impetus and general engagement and not pushback as an organisation, because we have such high analytical, logical people, we often get that, oh, no, we didn't. So it was like, oh, we're just going to kind of run with this a little bit. But we started quite gently just to see where we would get to and where we would get the uptake.
So what I'm hearing here, the timing of initiating, trying to create a coaching culture is really important. And I guess our listeners will know their own organisation better, obviously, than we do. So the timing of that communication and things that worked in your favour was new CEO, obviously having Martin, who's got that passion, but also that understanding, and just getting a sense from the rest of the organisation that the timing was right because you weren't getting that pushback from those individuals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I love it that you say it's just about having a different conversation. And again, when you put it like that, that's as simple as it is. Coaching culture is about having a different conversation, a conversation that's more connected and more collaborative. And the thing that I've learned in trying to implement coaching cultures across many organizations is that it's not just about the coach or the leader in this instance. Because if you are to have that different type of conversation and converse with others need to know how to have that type of conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And I like to explain the sort of the coaching as a dance, and we're teaching people how to have a different dance, hopefully a more enjoyable dance, and one that's sustainable, but also that everybody wants to dance with each other. So like you, I'm a great believer that utopia of a coaching culture is where everybody knows how to coach, but everybody knows how to be coached.
Yes.
And then the coaching culture is that we're coaching each other with those different conversations, but that's just how we do it.
Yeah.
And that becomes very, very powerful with that. So I know we've only just started, and I'd like to think we've made some good progress, got some good traction.
Yeah.
And changed some of that, maybe, let's say, more cynical individuals into buying into it and realizing that there is something in it for them and for those that they work with. What's in your mind the next stage is, and sort of give our listeners a sort of flavor of, from your own experience, not just within PRI, but Nesta and others, the sort of timelines that people can expect to see the impact that you talked about.
Yeah. So we started with the the leadership. So executive team trained, we're now going down to the next levels of management. They're going through the 3-day coach for a leader training. Alongside that, we are beginning communication within the wider workforce. So letting them know what we're doing and why we're doing it. After that, we'll move into some workshops with them, because as you just said, Trayton, it's so critical that the experience of being coached, so being a coachee, is quite different to what you may have had from your managers before. It's going to feel different, it's going to look different, and you need to prepare people for that. And you need to prepare them for how it's okay to walk into that feeling a little bit nervous, feeling like you might not know what you're doing and how you're supposed to engage with it, and
a little bit vulnerable,
right? That's quite different. In many organizations, I think that would feel different. I'm sure many of your listeners will resonate with the, oh God, what's that mean? How am I going to work with it? So it's really important to prepare them too. I think alongside that, as I said earlier, making sure that we embed this. So it's not just a tick, training done, move on, as so many of these things often are. So we've been working on some leadership competencies, which are in development. We want to be now engaging with our leaders to make sure that it works for them, so that they feel a sense of ownership of those competencies as well. Think about how that gets embedded into appraisals, objectives, that kind of thing. How we might recognise and praise and reward people that do it well. I think it's also, positive role models are a good thing to have within the organisation. But timeframes, to your question of timeframes, don't go fast would be my best bit of advice. We tried to early on and it was the wrong timing and we just had to slow things down. I'm glad we did. I'm glad we took time to make the space for it to happen at a phase of the PRI in which we knew we could give it time, we could give it the energy, we could give it the investment. It would have fallen flat if we'd have pushed it earlier. So I think you've got to give it a good year. Depending on your size of organisation, it may take longer. But for us, I think we're saying a year's investment into building the foundations, to getting the basics in place, the training in place, the systems working in the way that they should. Maybe you can come back to me in another year, Trayton, and ask how it's actually gone.
We should do that, another podcast. The impact of a coaching culture would be amazing to do that. Yeah. But I think the key point that you mentioned there, Lian, is around embedding it. Because I see so many organizations just go it's sadly a one-day program, tick the list, we've done coaching, now go and do coaching. It doesn't work like that. That might work to sort of give people an understanding of some of the models and tools that are coaching out there. But what it doesn't do is embed a mindset. And this is about, we're talking about, a coaching culture. A culture is a different operating system, a different way of doing things. And in the challenging climate, it will take time to allow people to make that shift and, enable people to make that shift. So, supporting them not just through the skills training, but afterwards as well. And also, as you say, celebrating those successes, show them that those changes are working, quick wins or other wins that are happening. You mentioned employee engagement, so show them that their employee engagement scores are going up, and talking to the sort of more qualitative where people are saying this stuff works, and I love this new style, and celebrate those things. So I love it that you're thinking in that way, and more longer term, more sustainable way of thinking. So you've obviously been through this journey yourself, both as an attendee, both as a executive member, and as an HR director, and there will be other HR directors, HR professionals listening on here. What would be some of your top tips that you provide to if someone came to you and said, look, Lian, I'm thinking of creating a coaching culture? What would be some of the key tips that you give them to help that be successful?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to repeat myself for some of it because I think it deserves repetition.
Yeah.
Buy-in at the top, like
Yep.
get that first, your runways clear, I would argue. Well, clearish, let's be honest. You're still going to get some bumps along the
Yes.
way. Think about your time frames. And I mean that not just in the sense of how long it's going to take, but finding a time in the schedule that means the investment can be given to doing it properly.
Yep.
I think doing it yourself is also really important. I think it's very easy for us as HR professionals. We've done much of this stuff. We probably have been on similar trainings. We have probably already deployed coaching techniques in how we're working, particularly if you've ever been a business partner, it'll have been something that you will have been doing, frequently. But being there, having your colleagues see, oh, you do this already to me, don't you? I think it brings it to life for them. It allows them to go, oh, it is possible to do it in a day-to-day basis without it feeling like this big, scary type of activity. You can do it small as well as doing it big. These things are acceptable. But I think being there with your colleagues is really really important. I also think thinking about the journey. So not just I'm doing this training, but what am I going to do with this training? And that's not just for you personally. I mean, I think for me, it comes very naturally for me to come out of that kind of training and go, oh, I need to do something with it. So Trayton, you'll be very pleased. Even now, I sit there and I think, is this a coaching opportunity for me?
Great.
Am I having an interaction where I can move more into that coaching style than being the directive type of style? But also to think about how I can then support my colleagues, because we went on this journey together.
Yeah.
I've been in a much better position to be able to, when they're talking to me about things that are happening within their teams, don't forget that training. What about the coaching? Is this an opportunity to try a different style? And they've got the tools. You've given them those tools and they can go, oh yeah. And I'm seeing them do that. So I think as a HR professional, and as a leader, I'm there as a leader, I'm there going on the journey with them, but I'm also there to support them, enable them, and to keep reminding them. That to me is also part of the embedding. Otherwise, they'll forget it, they'll stop doing it, and very quickly, the coaching culture will have gone.
Yeah. So it's keeping it at the forefront of everybody's minds.
Exactly.
Because it is a habit and it's quite easy to resort back to old habits.
Exactly. I mean, I get the opportunity to go into these coaching conversations because of the nature of the work I do.
Yeah.
The opportunities are there regularly, and they have to make those opportunities happen more.
And if I can just bring out two other bits, which are refinements of what you said before, is the timing is key, but going slow to make sure that you make sure that is embedded. Yeah. And that you're building those foundations to make sure that you can leverage that. And the other piece, which I think is really important for our listeners to understand, is don't try and do necessarily the whole organization at once.
No.
Focus on key areas that you're going to be able to embed it and get successes, and then celebrate those successes like a sort of a pilot.
Yeah.
Because my experience is when people see other parts of the business being successful, they become curious and they go, how are you doing that? And they go, well, we did this coaching program. We're using coaching to drive performance. Yeah. Oh, I want some of that.
Yeah.
So you build up that sort of propensity to want to do what others are doing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a bit like, when you see someone buy a nice shiny car, you think, oh, I want one of those. So it's creating that type of not healthy competitiveness in that. Absolutely. People are seeing other niches coming through to do that. And I think the other thing is around, you mentioned the employee engagement, but see and show people that it's working with other results. And one of the other areas is not just creating a coaching culture within, but how do you then use coaching to help drive customer satisfaction?
Yeah.
How do you use coaching conversations to help build stronger supplier relationships?
Yeah.
how do you use coaching to help the communities in which you're serving? So it's much more wider, I think, than just a coaching
Yeah,
culture within, but that's a
definitely.
good starting point for that.
Definitely.
Great. So, Leanne, one question that I always ask my guests,
Mm.
which is our purpose, which is coaching for a better tomorrow. And I know that this just sits so well with your sort of mindset and
Oh, yeah.
your values. So,
Mm.
what does coaching for a better tomorrow mean for you?
Yeah, I think about it in two ways. So if I think about it internally, coaching for a better tomorrow means that our people feel able, they feel empowered, they feel confident, they feel they have a role, they feel that critically they have purpose.
Mm.
That's what it means internally. That
Yeah, it is.
resonates with our culture, that resonates with the people that we employ. Um, that's for me what it looks like internally. I think externally, as you rightly say, the PRI is here to make a better world for all of us through the capital markets, but using that to ensure that every single one of us have that sustainable future for us, for future generations. And so using that culture to enable that within our members, within the interactions that our people are having externally, it could really take things to another level.
Mm.
And I think we've already seen a number of our people engaging with this, so say coaching and thinking about it very internally and then going, oh, I do this. I do this with our relationships, with our members, we refer to them as signatories.
Yeah.
And that I think has also been quite a transformative way of our people thinking and engaging with it. So yeah, it's got the opportunity to really make a change, both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Well, that's suddenly what gets me out of bed in the morning and excites me is about helping people have a different conversation
Yeah.
with every individual to help create a different world, a better world.
Mm.
And you've articulated both internally and externally about what coaching for a better tomorrow is. So, yeah, and as ever, it's a real pleasure to spend time with you and share our thoughts. And I'm looking forward to continue our journey towards a better tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Triton, and thank you for inviting me along. I very much enjoyed talking to you today, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it too.
Brilliant. I'm sure they have. And thank you.